One of the criteria we look at when judging top 20 whiskeys is something we call X factor, a little something special, something extra that makes a whiskey really stand out to us. This year, number 13 on our list was Virginia Distillery Company's Cider Cask finished Virginia-Highland whiskey. This had X factor like we've never seen before. It's a pretty unusual whiskey, and distillery manager Ian Thomas is here to explain it to us.
Yeah, so I guess a little background about the whiskey and the process to create Cider Cask, our Cider Cask finished whiskey. The selection for the whiskey was interesting and unique. There's not a lot of Cider Cask finishes out there. Traditional finishes typically are in different types of wine casks, sherry wine, port wines, but cider was unique to us and gave us a little bit more of a sense of place and location too, because cider in Central Virginia is also a very popular beverage. We worked with a couple of local producers, kind of rooted us in the Virginia, kind of Central Virginia area, working with those partners of ours, and then gave us a unique approach to a unique cask finish.
Yeah, and the whiskey itself, even before it gets in the cask, is pretty unusual. You guys are blending your own single malt whiskey that you make there in Virginia with blended malt whiskey from the Highlands of Scotland, right?
That's correct, yep.
So what is that process like when you're working with two such unusual, maybe not unusual, but different types of whiskey? Obviously, there is a big difference between scotch and American single malt.
Right. Well, first and foremost, the profiles are fairly different. So finding the balance of our single malt and that profile and the blended malt that we source out of the UK is difficult and challenging and changes over time, especially with different finishing casks. It's complex, right? There's a lot going on, but at the same time, there's a single path, and you can tell there's cider influence in there. And in general, when we think about cider and the cider cask aromas and components that those casks offer in the whiskey, and then our base whiskey, which is a malt, a blended malt, they're two very different types of whiskey. One, the malt whiskey, again, is very earthy or sweet at its core, but also provides, a sense of vanilla or butterscotches and toffees, what you would see out of a kind of a traditional ex-bourbon aged or matured malt whiskey. On the cider side, our cider casks offer, or what we've seen is some dry, even at sometimes bitter notes from the apple influence, and then other fruit aromas, pear, apple peel, red apple, sometimes green apple, or even stewed or poached apple, along with some baking spices and cinnamon. And so that dryness or that tartness with those apple components help balance that sweet, vanilla butterscotch toffee base. And so the trick in taking a look at the sensory panel and our panelists' feedback and all the data is finding and fine-tuning that balance so that not one component overshadows or overpowers the other. And that's difficult, and that at the end is almost where the art more or less comes into play. We could take it down to a science and look at all the data, but at the end of the day, what you get on your palate, what everyone perceives is slightly different, and everyone's palate is different. And so it's finding that balance, not just within ourselves, but for anyone to enjoy it.
I think it's a really beautiful accomplishment of blending and of base distillation too. I'm impressed with it. Obviously, we like it here. Cheers.
Cheers.
Cheers to you guys. Thanks for making a great whiskey.
Thank you.